super excited about this episode. This episode is something that Nikki and I kind of talked about maybe 4 months ago, sometime over the summer. We connected over Instagram, and I really liked her account. And I think I was talking something about manifesting while self-pleasuring, and like we had a conversation about that. And I really liked what you had to say and the information you had to give. So I knew right then that I wanted to have you eventually. I didn't even have a podcast at the time, but I was like, when I have one, I'm inviting Coach Nikki to come on the podcast. So welcome, Coach Nikki. I'm so excited to have you. I guess to start, maybe we should explain what it is that a sacred sexuality coach is and what you do.
Okay, and thank you so much, Monica, for having me. It's really an honor. I've been a fan of your work for a really, really long time. I know we were connected on Instagram, but I've been a huge fan. So it's really an honor to be here talking with you today. So first, I'll just do a quick background on what sacred sex is. So sacred sex is really, a lot of people find it a little intimidating. Oh, sacred sexuality, what is that? Is that something I can attain? And really what it is, it's a deeper level of your sex practice, right? So like in a baseline way, we're learning about sex in a very like it's intercourse kind of way, and there's orgasms, right? So like a sacred sex practice is more so that you can tap into a deeper level within that sexual space. You can tap into your spiritual self. For me, in my sacred sex practice, I feel like I'm tapping into my spirit, into my femininity, my subconscious and conscious mind. And it really opens me up, and it feels very integrated and very wholesome. So for me, that's what the sacred sexuality practice is. And as a sacred sexuality coach, my goal is to help primarily women. I have worked with a few couples, but primarily women, to understand that they have the ability to tap in a deeper way. They have the ability to, one, become more naturally orgasmic, and two, to really feel a lot more pleasure from sex and really release that shame that's surrounded a lot of times in the sexual world and towards women that have a very positive and open sex practice. So really my goal in the coaching work is to help women to go a little bit deeper in their sex practice.
I love that. What led you to become a sacred sex coach?
I was very fascinated with the idea of, when I was very young, I remember seeing on, who was it? Jenny Jones. When I was younger, they had sex therapists on the show. And she spoke about how like something like, 82 at that time, right, in the 90s, 82% of women are like not orgasmic. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Like, what is this study, And when I started to have sex as a young woman, I'm like, I'm one of that 82%. Like, I'm not orgasmic. So I kind of just accepted that as my truth. And through my journey of like maturation and really trying to explore and figure out what it was that I wanted, I had such a shift. I went from not being an orgasmic woman at all to being highly orgasmic, and just experiencing those different levels of pleasure, and those different, like it was definitely something that was going on with me, right? It was like a mindset thing or a comfort thing or like an understanding of my own self. So just kind of having that experience, that one spectrum to the complete opposite spectrum, was fascinating to me. So I did get certified in sacred sexuality to learn. Really, the program was more designed to teach myself to be more orgasmic and to tap into myself a little bit more, but it allows you to teach as well. So once I did that program, I said, you know what, I want to reach other women. I would love to really turn this into like a sex educating platform, because there are studies that talk about, women having an enhanced sexual response system, which makes us highly orgasmic. And this is not taught about in sex ed. This is not talked about. It's not looked at in porn. There's no, those places that we are learning about sex from, whether it be conversations from parents or family, sex ed in school, which is so basic, or unfortunately from pornography, we're not learning about these multi layers. of what it can mean to have like a fulfilling sexual practice. So I thought, you know what, I want to reach women, I want to tap in, and it's something I'm just extremely passionate about.
I remember when I was in high school, I actually did my senior career project on Dr. Ruth. Like, I wanted to become Dr. Ruth, which
Yeah.
was, I don't know if you know who that is, but like, she was like,
She's
she
that older
probably,
woman, right? She's like
yeah,
an older lady.
but she
She's
was
like
like
a
an
sex.
old little short, Jewish woman. I believe she's Jewish.
Yeah,
And
just with all the
she,
sex information, right?
yeah, but she made it. I feel like at that time, I went to high school in the 90s. She was like one of the only people who was talking about women and
Right.
orgasms and sex. And so that was all we really had. I think I felt like for a long time, sex was something you did to please your partner, right? I'm
Right.
curious to know, what were you taught like as a young person?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Actually, it's nothing. I was raised by a single father, and he was phenomenal, the best man I've ever known. He passed away when I was 16 years old, but
I'm
he
sorry.
was such a powerful figure. I think his idea was that I can talk to her later, right? Like I wasn't anywhere close to being a sexually active 16-year-old girl, right? So I think that he was like, this can come later, and
Wow.
unfortunately he just didn't get that opportunity. So I was
Wow.
like winging it and learning as I went. And right here's the thing, I was learning about sex from boys. There weren't any young boys when I started having sex that were, oh, I really want to make sure you're happy. I really want to make sure this is wonderful for you. It was more of like, I know that I'm going to ejaculate and let's get to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it wasn't, I was really just kind of going along and learning as I went, in a sense. And I had that
Wow.
same mindset. I have to be extremely pleasing in this space to this man. Like, I know that I'm sexy. I know that this guy likes me. Let me be very pleasing. And I've really never thought that there was anything in it for myself.
And there's a lot of validation in that space too. And it's immediate validation. Like if you know, can cause a man to have his own orgasm or ejaculate, like there's immediate feedback that you get. And I think, as I was going through my sexuality journey as a young woman, that validation became important. Like that became, something that I did really value, like my
Yeah,
work was starting to be centered around kind of this idea that I am, good in bed, so
right.
that's so interesting. And to be raised by a man, and then have to figure this out on your own,
Yeah.
and to go and seek education on it and become an educator. I think so
Yeah,
much of this journey is about healing ourselves and then teaching other people how we did it. So I love that
absolutely.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's one of my clients actually recently told me, she's a little bit older than me. She found a research article that I would love to find more information on. There was a study that was done in the early 2000s that said young women that had a father figure in the home growing up are more orgasmic. And I
I
thought, wow,
see that.
that's so powerful, because I think for certain that my femininity plays a role in my sacred sex practice. So I believe that my femininity really became alive because of my father. It was
Yeah.
almost like my dad was very powerful in his natural right as a man and as a Black
Mm-hmm.
father. So it
Mm-hmm.
was almost like a follow the leader innately, very innately. And
Mm-hmm.
it just let me be like soft. It just let me be like in my
Mm-hmm.
essence as like a young girl and know that he was handling life and the hard things. So I think that that's fascinating to me, that having that father figure in the home as a young woman, there's some studies that have said these women are more orgasmic, because I think that it ties in that safety, you
I
know?
agree. I also just had an amazing dad
Hmm.
who lost 5 years ago. So,
Hmm.
but I never thought about it in the way that you just articulated it. But what I do know about my dad is that he didn't use shame as a tool in any kind of parenting. Like he just let you be. And so, and he revered you for who you were. Like, so there just wasn't that shaming. I think a lot of what I learned in terms of shame came from the women in my family. And I think it was something that was done to them, and that probably had been done to their mothers. And like, it was just this, I really feel like it was kind of like we don't know what else to say about this, but you shouldn't be doing it. If you're going to get pregnant. I remember hearing, it's going to be painful. Like, there was nothing in those conversations that made this about me or my pleasure or anything like that.
Right.
And there was a lot of shame. That's what I remember.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think I felt the same way. I think those small conversations that I may have picked up on is like, oh, this is going to hurt. You're going to bleed. You can get pregnant. Like, if you do this, people are going to think you're a slut. And there's never been this main information of like how really powerfully beautiful the sex practice can be when you're engaging in it properly and with a full heart and like a full understanding. It's just that education isn't there, and I am embarking on a journey to hopefully try and change that.
I love that. I worked in the education system for nearly 2 decades, and in Ohio. And Ohio is well, at least at the time when I was working there, it's a abstinence only state. So my first job, I remember I had young women who had babies. And we had a daycare in the school, but I was not allowed to talk to these girls about anything other than abstinence. And I thought it was the craziest thing. Like, they already had sex. Like, so I was not allowed to teach anything other than you should not have sex, which I think is a shaming message in and of itself too, especially if you're already having sex. Right. And there was just so much miseducation. So many girls, like, do I have 2 holes? Do I have 3 holes? Like, genuinely did not know. And I was not allowed to talk about those things with them. And so, of course, I found my little ways to go about things that were outside of the box. But yeah, it was a very difficult thing to educate on because the policy did not want us to talk about that. What would you say are some of the obstacles and barriers that women face in reaching orgasm and receiving pleasure?
I think one of the biggest ones is some miseducation. I think that miseducation is there, and for a lot of women feel so much shame around the sex practice, and it's really unfortunate. I've worked with women that are like, there's no way I would let a man go down on me. Like, my husband just won't. I cannot allow it. They're just embarrassed. There's shame around it just because of the way that they must have learned about sex from a younger age. So I think that miseducation is stopping and halting women in a way from obtaining orgasms, and also women having knowledge of the different types of orgasms that they can have. Because I've had clients that feel like, it's just the clitoris orgasm, which isn't accurate. There's different zones and neural pathways within the vagina that are published studies that can create magnificent, beautiful, prolonged orgasms that women don't know about. And there are studies too that say when women know about these features, in a sense, of our sex organs, we are more likely to obtain these orgasms. So in a lot of cases, me educating women in my coaching work is really enough for some women to say, like, I'm ready to start this new journey. Like, I didn't know that. This is going to be different for me now. This is going to be really helpful. So I think having that education and really removing that shame. And a lot of times removing that shame it's not going to always be as easy as women working with me. I might need to refer them to talk a little bit more about some past trauma or something that they've experienced that might then open them up to be ready to really embrace sex in a more full spectrum way. So women recognizing that they might need to learn a little bit more and recognizing that they can heal some of that shame that they've experienced and really put that behind them.
Yeah, I do think and see how it's twofold, because you really do have to heal from the shame of it all before you can probably even be open to practices. I'm interested to know about these zones and some of these practices that you are teaching.
Yeah.
Um, like, tell me more.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
So there's a really interesting research paper that I found that I have been able to incorporate into my teachings. And they did a study years ago, probably before the 90s, but they spoke about neuro pathways inside of the vagina that give us what they're calling like an A spot and an O spot, and I believe the C spot, which is like a cervical pleasure zone. So they're
Mm,
all connected to apparently the like root of the clitoris, which is now understood to be the G spot. So they say that the clitoris starts at the top and extends inside, kind of in a bulb kind of shape. So the G
okay.
spot is a part of the clitoris, but there's other neural pathways within that whole entire region that can make just the entire inside of the vagina just kind of a lit up like orgasmic zone in a sense. And
Wow.
in that and in that information too, that access that we have to that zone and that orgasmic zone and that sensation is what they call like a woman's enhanced sexual response system. So we have, and I don't believe there's any studies that say men have this, but women
Mm,
have this sexual response system that turns on during sex and it keeps us in this heightened state of arousal almost, where we can be very orgasmic. And they are studying our orgasmic consciousness as well, which is kind of
mhm.
like a zone that we get into in our like essence as women, and we're receiving like the ideal idea of it is that women receive sex, like we're receiving the man. So we just kind of turn on this very blissful this energy and we're in this very orgasmic zone and we're just receiving, you know, all this glory and these beautiful experiences, and our vagina is like right along there with us, and then we're in this state of orgasmic consciousness that is what, you know, that's like that space you're in when a woman might describe how an orgasm feels, you know, like being
Mhm.
floaty and transcending and euphoric and, you know, traveling in time and however a woman might experience it, that's the orgasmic consciousness. And some women can stay in it longer afterwards, or this can ride it through the whole sex session. And others, I do believe that I'm learning now with working with some clients that women have to kind of build up the understanding of the orgasmic consciousness. And I think it's really kind of about going into that space and feeling it. I know a lot of men and women, we can be in our heads during sex. It's kind of like I'm thinking about groceries or I'm thinking about this or that, but really setting that time for this intimacy and really being able to plug into it is very, very important too, especially for women, because we have all these magical things that are able to happen during our sex practice that I'm trying to help more women get fully in touch with.
That's amazing. I think as you say that, and I'm just ruminating over my own sex practice, I do feel like there are times where when I can just lay back, and it's almost like I go into a meditative state, and that is
Yeah,
usually when I receive the most pleasure. But what tends to happen and brings me out of that, why I don't sustain it, is because it truly is like a quiet meditative state. And I think that in the performance of sex, at least what we believe we have to be doing, I have to be moaning. I have to be like doing, making, moving, like moving so that this partner feels like he's, doing something. Like it just
right.
feels sometimes like there's pressure to
Yeah,
perform
yeah,
as opposed to just staying in that meditative state. I think what you're describing is not just helpful for women, but I think it would also be helpful for men to
yeah,
understand,
for sure.
like that quietness, that stillness is purposeful.
100%. I mean, sometimes it almost can feel like a plugging in, kind of
Hmm.
just being plugged in and feeling that energy. It's very much an energetic thing. And when you are aligned with your partner and there's a mutual honoring and a mutual respect present, that energy exchange is powerful. And it at times in my own sex practice, it feels out of my control. I can have moments where it's almost instantaneous, if you know what I'm saying.
Wow.
Like, it's kind of like, all right, you've plugged into me and now don't move at all. Like, give me a
Yeah.
couple seconds, like
Yeah.
it's coming, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, that's
Yeah.
gotta be, what else could that be other than an energy, right? It's like,
Yeah.
because it doesn't even take any friction at times. You know what I mean? So it's just,
Mm-hmm.
there's just so much here to explore.
Mm-hmm.
They're scientists and they're still trying to work out and figure out the woman's sexual system. Like, we are magical in this space.
Yes.
And I'm probably
Mm-hmm.
only tipping the iceberg, just the tip of the iceberg with what I'm teaching, but there's so much more to be done and explored in this space, I believe. And I love all of it. It's fascinating to me.
Yes. I love that you are here teaching us. Um, so when you talk about just that state of euphoria is really what it just how to
Mhm.
describe it, I would say. Um, one of the things that you and I, talked about, and I mentioned this at the beginning, was the ability to manifest
Right.
during this practice. So a lot of women had questions about that. You know, didn't know what that meant. And it was interesting when I made that post and you and I kind of bonded over it. There were some women who they didn't even understand like the self-pleasuring part. Like there's still women in the world, I think, who don't masturbate.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Because and maybe because that is, surrounded in shame that
Right.
they touch themselves and things like that. But yeah, maybe if you could talk a little bit more about the practice of sacred sexuality in terms of manifesting.
For sure. And also around that, the idea of that shame during self pleasure. In the Victorian era, there was a time when women were prohibited from self pleasuring. I don't recall the name, but they had, I think it's like chastity belts or something that they would wear
Mm-hmm.
that is to keep them pure and keep them virgins, but women were not allowed to masturbate either. And I think that there's some history in there where they thought women were manifesting things, that women were tapping into some power that they had. And they were like, you women need to not, you know what I mean? Like, you guys need to just be homemakers. Like, don't go manifesting things. You know what I mean? So
I'm sure
it's
they probably accused them of witchery because we get
right.
accused of witchery for everything. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. It's
I
really
definitely
interesting.
heard of chastity belts and like keeping women pure, but I never heard of the threat of you might be engaging in some powerful manifestations, and so we
Yeah.
don't want you to do that. That's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And so I think there probably could be some families where mothers are like, don't touch yourself, because this is something that their grandmothers were taught. So, like, don't do that. That's dirty. That's impure. Like, it's, a husband doesn't want that. Whatever it might take for them to say. But I think that it's important to know what you enjoy, right? As far as a self pleasure practice, I think it's very important to know what you enjoy. It's important to explore yourself, because if you can't explore yourself and find zones and things that you like, it's hard to understand someone else doing that. So I think it's very important. And it doesn't have to be like this addictive thing, or it doesn't have to be associated with pornography or anything. Because my story about self pleasure and manifestation is very, very interesting. And the only way I can explain it really is that I feel like I received some sort of spiritual download at a point in time. Um, for a while, for me, my fantasy when I would self pleasure was always about a man like loving being inside me. That was my fantasy. A man
Mm-hmm.
loving being inside me, like there's no way I can pull out. It just is what it is, kind of fantasy. Like, do you understand like what I'm saying? That was kind of
Mm-hmm.
I loved that. Like, that's that like gratification of making this man feel amazing and reaching this
Mm-hmm.
orgasm. So that was my sexual fantasy when I would self-pleasure. So I was reaching my orgasm thinking about a man being absolutely obsessed with being inside me. And for a period of time in my life, what did I have? Men that were obsessed with having sex with me.
Wow.
So I had
Wow.
to take a beat and I thought, okay, I'm over it. I had it. I had it. I had the fantasy. I had the guys that just wanted whatever. What if I, during my pleasure practice, thought about someone loving me, honoring me, covering me, protecting me, a man that loved me, and respected me. And to my surprise, I'm being completely honest, I surprised myself that I was even able to reach an orgasm from thinking about this sort of fantasy. There was no physical, there was no face on the man. It was truly just a thought of a man like, I love you. I want to spend my life with you. Like, you are the woman that I want to be with. I want to protect you. And that's how I climaxed in that practice, in that moment. And
Wow.
shortly after that, I got exactly that. I feel
Wow.
like I manifested a man in my life that loved me and respected me and honored me. And it has not at any point been about just sex, which was what I was getting before.
That is such a good story, Coach Nikki. I've never
Thank you.
so no, I do. I love it. So I do use pornography in my sex practice, and I think in the earlier phases of it, it was very male centered porn. Like the fantasies were revolving around what a man might enjoy,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that really up until my 40s was the primary, kind of porn I would watch. And then there was some coach that talked about like stop, watching those crime shows and stop watching, kind of these things that are trauma based uh, media
Mm-hmm.
and start watching like romantic comedies, like just transition what you're ingesting in terms of media. So I took that a step further and said, I want to start looking at porn where the man is like making love to the woman, which I
Mm.
don't think when I say that to my friends, they're like, we didn't even know there was porn. And there isn't a lot, but like you can
Yeah.
literally,
Mm-hmm.
you can search, man making love to a woman. And for me, I do black man making love to a black woman. And so I get now these pornographic images where it is a man taking his time, a man really, um, catering to a woman. And like
Right.
now that is the type of media I ingest during self pleasuring practice.
Yeah.
And it changed the game. Like it changed the game. Like it's such a different um feeling and experience.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I didn't think about manifesting the man. I'm never manifesting a man. I got to do better. I'm always manifesting like a yacht or like something else. But like I gotta get
Yeah,
that. I
I'll
gotta get
take
to.
it. Yeah.
I never thought about that, but I like what you said about focusing on like the type of man
Yeah.
that you
And
would
it
want
it
in your
really
life.
surprised me, honestly, because I'm like, there's no sex, there's no kissing in this fantasy, there's no penetration. And the first time I did it, my climax was so insanely powerful. Like, it was
Wow.
so surprising. And I'm like, wow, did I just give like the universe like my like orgasmic energy, which the orgasm is so intense and it's so mysterious. Like, I just gave this to the universe with something that I want. And okay, now we'll see. Now we'll see what happens here.
Ladies, you heard it from Coach Nikki. Start manifesting the type of man you want in your self pleasuring practices, and they will show up in your life. Like that is a really good story. And I'm
Yeah.
so happy to hear about a woman who's being loved properly in her
Yeah.
life. So I
And
love that for you.
And it's really interesting too, because I write a lot of poetry. I have a poetry book that I wrote. And in that book, I do have some poetry. It reads like a story, the poetry book. But I have some poems in that book where I'm talking about, I wasn't feeling very fulfilled. And, this is what I want to experience in my sex practice. And this is what I want to feel from a man. And I also feel like in that me writing it down, me kind of like journaling and writing it in poetry, what I wanted, what I didn't want, really helped me kind of sort through what it was that I would or wouldn't tolerate, what I wanted. It helped narrow that down for me to really understand. I think it really put me in a space where when I found someone that clicked really well for me, I would know it.
Mm,
That
I
writing
love
it
that.
down and really
Yeah.
organizing what you want.
I love that as a manifestation practice. Um, what do you, I didn't really think to ask any questions for the men, but for men who might tune into this episode,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say to them in terms of providing safe spaces for women to reach climax? Like, what advice would you give or what suggestions would you give to them?
Yeah. I think honestly, what works best is truly making a woman feel wanted, right? Like we as women, we know the difference between a man trying to just put it in, you know what I mean, versus a man that's like, you are beautiful and I love every inch of you. Like really enjoying the essence of the woman, really enjoying the skin, the smell, the experience, and the touch. I know that, of course, sex is exciting. I don't think I always have sex that's very like drawn out. Sometimes we get right to it. That's just the
Mhm.
vibe of it sometimes. But I think to create that space is really making a woman feel admired, really making a woman feel admired. And whether that be through words, or your actions or through touch, but really taking your time with a woman. And that's really just in the foreplay, taking that time to make that woman feel like you're interested in her and not just what you can get at the end by achieving an orgasm. Make this woman feel like you appreciate the time, energy, and space, not just that she's a tool for you to reach an orgasm. That's like the first part of it. But really explore in your sex practice, explore, find out what positions, what angles, what she doesn't like, because I'm guilty of being a woman that won't speak up, because like we were both saying, we wanted to be extremely pleasing to the men, right? So I wasn't a woman that would speak up for a long time. So finding out, what do you like, what do you not like, is it okay if we try to do a slow sex practice, because that's a big part of what I do in my teachings too, is talk about a slow sex practice. Um, but some men can't tolerate it. But, maybe let's figure out why not. This could be important to a woman to have a slower sex practice. So I think really just having those conversations. What are you enjoying? What are you not enjoying? What do you want to explore? Let's explore this together. Let's try and tune into our energies together.
Mm-hmm. I think that men, I would imagine, one I know, also have a lot of healing that needs to be done in their own sexual practices. And because I really feel like sex is like probably one of the primary forms of intimacy, let's say.
Right.
And so if you have a fear of really being seen, of really, seeing another human, of really being intimate, really getting close, because there's a lot of vulnerability in that, right? So I think that if you have a fear and avoidance of that, then sex becomes much more of a surface practice than
Right.
this deeper, connection. And then what I find is that men become frustrated because they can't bring women to orgasm, especially like vaginal sex. And so I know I've been in a relationship where people were just frustrated that they could not bring me to orgasm in that way, but not really at the same time wanting to explore other ways. Like, I think that
Right.
our society is so male centered. So sex in and of itself also becomes a very male centered practice. And what we know is the man's penis goes in the vagina and that creates ejaculation for him. So then there's
Right.
not a whole lot of conversation or talk about,
Yeah.
there being other ways for that orgasm to happen, and that it's okay if it doesn't happen vaginally, like just
Right.
being able to relax and know that that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you as a man, that maybe, that just isn't. Do you think that all women can reach orgasm vaginally? I don't know. Like, I question that.
Yeah. So I believe truly that the natural design is yes.
Okay.
But I think that some women have work that they need to do probably to really open up that energetic space within. Yeah. Because and it's again, I'm my own like testimony. Like I wasn't having, I just was like, you know what, Jenny Jones? All right. The lady you had on your show, I'm in that 82% or whatever. It just is what it is. It's going to be okay. And then things changed for me. And I feel like for things to have changed, then it's almost, I almost looked at it like if I can be this highly orgasmic, this must be the original way. We must be breaking ourselves to make it not this way.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like we must be breaking our sexual response systems for us to not be orgasmic. That's my personal opinion, just because the miseducation, the no education, really, when I really started to be sexually active and then going to the complete other end of the spectrum of being extremely orgasmic and the sensations and the levels, the different levels of orgasms and the sensations of sex. I feel like for that to be able to exist on the one end, that must be the first design of it. And we're breaking ourselves.
So would you say then that in our self-pleasuring practice, we should focus on more areas than the clitoris? Like a lot of us are just using our roses and,
Right,
the
right,
rose is really just clitoral stimulation.
right.
So do you think we should be more expansive in terms of what we're utilizing in our self-pleasuring practice?
I think different things work for different women. I'm not a personal fan of objects of any kind, but I know some
Yeah.
women, that's what works for them. But I think that the energy in like something that's battery operated could be a problem personally.
Mm.
But I do think the exploration is important. Because there's a spot on the outside of the vaginal opening that is an erogenous zone. So like even if you're stimulating the clitoris and you were to like have your hand kind of at your vaginal opening, you can feel some additional pleasure from that too without even penetrating with your fingers. So
Mm.
that I think exploring in that way and even internally can be beneficial as well, just to even get the idea of the sensations, even without the partner, getting the idea of the sensations and really figuring out what that feels like if your partner's going to kind of wake those sensations up as well.
I think that's so helpful because as you're saying that, I do feel that so my more powerful, explosive, squirting orgasms happen with my hands.
Mm.
But it's almost like, so I think there's a lot of shame, but I also think, Coach Nikki, that there is some internalized fear of how powerful we are. Because I stopped using my hands and started using the rose. And the rose does not give me that intensity, but it just feels safer. Like I don't even know like it, I don't know. Like it,
That's
I don't
really
know.
interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. But that also speaks to one of the primary reasons why I wanted to have the conversation, in that
Yeah.
I do feel like if we are denying ourselves our most optimum orgasm, what other ways are we denying pleasure in our lives? Like if I am, afraid to be as powerful as I can be in that space,
Yeah.
where am I minimizing myself in other spaces as well?
Right,
I think it's
right.
all interconnected,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's funny you say that about the level of orgasms because um it, like I mentioned before, that when I was thinking about like being loved and like, you know, receiving love and giving love, like those orgasms are so much more powerful than ones where, and they hold, like it holds, it's like prolonged, it's like it freezes and it's like gripped up. I can't explain it, you know, but it's more powerful than like just a quick like sex fantasy orgasm, you know, in a
Yeah.
self-pleasure practice. And it's really interesting because that energy is present and it's doing so much that we probably don't really understand. But you have such a good point with us like not really tapping in that way. Like what other areas, you know, are we leaving out? What else are we forgetting about or really feeling almost shameful and just kind of like, maybe I'll just not, you know, maybe I'll just sit this one out kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you are denying yourself pleasure in any space, I would imagine you're denying yourself pleasure in every space. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
the
Like almost
connection is,
in a space where you're feeling like, well, maybe I don't deserve this, or maybe
mm,
I'm not worthy of this. And that
oh,
that
Coach
is like
Nikki.
that is like a it's so unfortunate because I know that feeling and I don't it's like a programming maybe almost. You
Hmm.
know, I don't know if it's towards women or women of color. I don't know where it really originates, but I know I felt that way like, oh, I don't deserve to feel this good. You know, I don't
Mm,
deserve to feel this much. You know what I mean? And it's,
mm.
yeah.
Ladies, we got to stop being afraid to feel um, our maximized pleasure. Like,
Yeah.
we are worthy of maximum pleasure, not medium pleasure,
Yeah.
not okay pleasure, but maximum pleasure. Yeah, I think it probably is related to self worth. I hadn't even necessarily thought about it maybe in that way
Right.
directly, but for sure, there is a self worth component to why, outside of just the shame of it, but why, do you feel like you're not worthy of your best orgasm? Or having somebody to take the time to get you to a point of that orgasm. I know a lot of women will talk about, even in oral sex, will say, well, it takes me so long.
Yeah.
And the thoughts of like, this person has to take so long
Yeah.
to do it, it starts to become a mind game, a head trip. Like, you
Yeah.
can't just let yourself go because you're so worried about inconveniencing somebody else. I think a lot of our struggle is just in women being conditioned to please other people, so then
Right.
taking the time to really sit back and allow yourself to be pleasured. I think it is somewhat of a self-worth, and that could be an obstacle.
Yeah. And, you know, as women, I talk a lot about femininity, like feminine embodiment in my coaching. And we really are like, we are feelers, right? Like as women, we feel and we receive. And like, that's kind of just the essence of it. And to not really be feeling at our best, you know, and not receiving at our best and feeling our best orgasms, it's like, it's going against our natural design. It's going against it because we're supposed to be feeling all the things. You know, we are nurturers, we are emotional. You know what I mean? We have so many different components that go into us more than men. You know, we just have more feeling components than men. And we should be feeling these things at our at its max for sure.
I think you said something interesting in the beginning of the podcast when you talked about your dad. You said, he took care of the hard stuff, and that allowed you to be feminine. And I think in this um, unfortunate war of the sexes that we are inundated in right
Oh
now,
my God, yes.
like, I hate it. It
Oh my God.
becomes, very much about money and just things that really, to me, don't get to the essence of what love and intimacy really is. But when we talk about providing, leading, masculine energy, if you will, it's so much more than just what you can bring to the table monetarily. Like, because you didn't say anything about your dad and money. Like, you talked about, like, your dad did the harder thing. So
Yeah.
you could just show up in your femininity.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
could just relax
Absolutely.
and be feminine. And I think what men don't understand is, because we have the ability to tap into this manifestation power, this orgasm. When you provide these soft spaces where we can just show up in our femininity, like we can bless you tenfold.
Absolutely.
I think that's what we're not like.
Yeah.
We're not understanding, you know?
Yeah, we're like operating, if we're tapping into like the masculine and we're operated in like action mode, it's hard for us to sit back into our true power. So then we're not transmitting our authenticity as women.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I am in my most feminine state, the ideas, the creativity, like I could take your business to a multi-million-dollar. I know I could, like,
Right.
because when I'm in my femininity, like that energy is just, it is very abundant and manifesting, like it. And so, yeah, I think that sometimes when men are like, well, what do you bring to the table? I will change your whole life. Like your whole life will be.
How about it? Magic.
So yeah, we could talk about that all day.
Yes.
Well, as we get to a close, I want you to be able to talk a little bit about what you have coming up in your practice and how women can connect with you and the services you provide.
Okay. So my website and my company, my business is called Desire Different. So my website's www.desiredifferent.com. And I offer a sacred sexuality coaching. And it's generally like a 2-hour coaching where I'm able to cover majority of everything. But I have had clients do like follow-ups where we do a little bit more work, and clients that will follow up just in general to kind of just check in. I also have a orgasmic manifestation coaching that I do, as well as a femininity and magnetism coaching. And I do have a couple things for free. A part of my sacred sexuality coaching, I do a cord removal meditation, a guided meditation. So I do offer that free on my services page. And I do a root healing guided meditation for clients as well, because I feel like those two things are something that are accessible for me to do with clients. And I find them to be really helpful in clients opening up and feeling a little bit more comfortable on what their goals might be. So, and I also have like a free discovery call. So if women are interested in kind of chatting and seeing like, is this something that I want to do? You know, are we a good fit? Right. I mean, I know this isn't a big avenue right now. I think it's coming around for sacred sexuality coaches. And there's other women doing similar work under different titles. But women can check in with me and see if this is something that works for them. We can do a free discovery call to talk a little bit more. And I hope to hear from some people, because I'm really hoping that we can make a turn here. And it's really just a re-education on sex, because I just truly feel like they leave so much out, because again, it could be like, just keep everyone dumbed down. Let's not let people understand their true essence and this true magic. And, I feel like it's so powerful, and we should all be able to express ourselves sexually in this maximum space, for sure.
Yes. What I wanted to go back to something you said, because I wanted clarification. What is the cord removal?
So it's a guided meditation that I do with clients where you basically cut ties. In one session, you're generally supposed to do one cutting. It's a guided meditation where you energetically cut a cord. It can be removing a person that you feel connected to, a behavior, a thought process, a pattern you want to let go of, an addiction you want to let go of. But I guide you into cutting that energetic cord and tossing it out of your life, and sewing up and patching up and healing it, and like kind of saying it's your goodbye release ritual.
Yes, I love that. And for listeners, I talk a lot about the type of therapy that I did. I really liked, Coach Nikki, that you made a point to differentiate between what a coach does and what a therapist does, and said that, sometimes you have to refer women out to get some of that deeper trauma work
For
therapy.
sure.
I did a type of therapy called EMDR therapy, which is a trauma-based therapy, but it's very similar to what you just described in terms of like a lot of it is really getting your brain to reprocess a trauma story so that it can store it correctly and you're not so triggered in the world. So that's really what you're saying. Like you go through a manifestation ritual to help the brain release, and that is, I mean, that therapy changed my life. So I hope, as women are listening to this, that you will be encouraged to, if you know that this is something you struggle with and you've already done that deeper traumatic work, definitely connect with Coach Nikki to take it to the next level. No pun intended. Yeah, this has been an amazing conversation. I think you are going to help so many women. There is, like, you said, I think there is probably an agenda to keep us from reaching our ultimate power. In many ways, and especially as women,
we have moments where we're like, are we worthy? Like, do we deserve that? Like yes, we do. We deserve it, all of it.
And it's crazy to me sometimes to think like that in 2023, we're still being threatened with the fear of being called a witch. Like in this century,
right?
You know what I mean? Like it sounds so archaic to talk about like women were witches and like I remember reading about the Salem witch trial. Like it sounds so far and long ago.
Yeah.
But there's still like we're still calling Beyonce a witch. We're calling Doja Cat, like we're these women who are exuding their sexuality.
Yes.
And not even just their sexuality, but just their power. Their innate power.
A confidence. It's the essence of the woman. When women wear it right, it radiates, it creates, it magnetizes, and it's magical. It really is. And that idea of it's being witchcraft is a little outdated. It's really a beautiful thing. Women can use it for a lot of beauty.
But I think it's purposeful. I think it also is a way of shaming women to stay in their place.
I've recently edited my website, and on my homepage it says, "Be the woman in the room that other women want to learn from." Right? And that's speaking to, radiate your energy. Radiate who you are, and let's not be upset with each other for doing it. Let's learn from each other. Let's embrace each other. If I see a woman walk in a room and she's killing it and she's just stunning, sis, you look beautiful.
Yes.
What?
That's my favorite thing.
Like
to do.
Lift each other up and support our beauty and us radiating our femininity and our confidence. I support all of that.
Yes, because we all are under the same patriarchal rules. We're under the same pressures. I always say, if anybody understands us, it's us. Because we all go through the same thing.
Yeah.
I remember, I'm probably going to post it before I post the episode as a reminder, but I was doing a live once and I was talking about an epiphany I had. I started having sex at like 14 and a half. And for a long time, I would say 13 and a half, which is so interesting. Like I literally had been shamed so much that I changed my age and my story to make it match the shame that I was feeling. Like, isn't that crazy? But I was 14 and a half, and I remember like having my first kiss at 11, and like I just had these urges, like I wanted to explore my body. I wanted my body to be explored at this young age, and I remember being called fast was a terminology that was used. But one of the things that I carried that shame well into my 40s, and probably like within the last year, I had an epiphany about I started my period at 11. Like the natural biology of my body, like at 11 was wanting to have, I had sexual urges.
Yeah.
And instead of that being normalized or explained to me, it was just shamed. You know what I mean? Like, and it's such a odd thing for women to have to go through because it is literally a normal part of your development.
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so then to have, and I think about it in a lot of ways, like just even as your breasts develop and it's, cover that up. Like you gotta, like, it's like your period, like you don't want anybody to know you got a period. Like it's like every aspect of our maturation
Yeah.
is shamed and
Yeah.
we're told to minimize it. Like before we even get to the sexual practice,
Right.
just the maturation of our development
Right.
is like, has so much shame.
Right.
And we all go through that. Like we all experience that, I think, to some degree. And so it's so important that we can come together with other women and share those experiences, have these conversations, and normalize, that there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like, you're not a bad person.
Yeah.
Like, you're not a witch. You're not like fast. You're not a whore. Like,
Right.
it is a normal thing for you to have sexual urges. And even at those earlier ages, especially after you start your cycle.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the menstrual cycle thing. My daughter is 15 now, but I remember her telling me, like, when she started her cycle, she was like, some of my friends don't know what it's about. Like, I was telling my friends, because I gave her, I explained it to her. I said, your body's going through this. If your egg's not fertilized, your body's going to get rid of the blood because it doesn't need to hold a fertilized egg. So she understood what her body was going through. I felt like it would have been a huge disservice for me as a mother, as her guide, as the woman cultivating her, to have her thinking, I'm just bleeding and I don't know what it's about. It's weird. It's stupid. It's bad. If you have that education, I feel like it allows a young woman to, I know what this is about. I'm going to take good care of it. I know what my it's empowering, right? To know why your body's dealing with this situation versus like, oh my God, I'm hurt. I'm bleeding. We're not doing that. We're education. Education. Know what's happening here. This is your body.
I would love to have you come back and maybe do another episode about educating our daughters and talking to our daughters. I think I did a lot of things semi well with my daughters. I did, give education about periods. I did give education about self-pleasuring, but I still think like I was carrying so much shame that shame got passed down too, so it still wasn't, so I would love to have you come back and
absolutely
and share, some of those insights.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Coach Nikki, for
You're
this
welcome.
episode and for being willing to come on here and do this. Ladies, I'm gonna drop her website in the caption portion so that you all will have that information and can connect with her. I'll include your Instagram if that's okay.
Yeah,
so
that's the one that I
you.
use. That's my one social media I do use is the Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. So, ladies, get in touch. Let's connect and let's heal, as I always say.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for listening. Yes. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.